So we're flying along now, we're nearly finished with this website, we just need to add a couple more sections, and we're going to create another winter section, another season class, which is very similar to summer, but with one important difference, and that's the image in the background is going to be different. So that is actually going to create some difficulties for us, and we'll have to look at some new ways to deal with that. So we're going to introduce the concept of IDs as well as duplicate classes. So if we go back to our HTML, just like we've been getting used to doing, below that section that we created before, I'm going to create a new section. And actually I'm just going to copy and paste this one that I made earlier, the one for the summer class. I'll go down here, paste that in, and of course I'm going to change the text to winter. And now if I go back to full screen, because I've got the same class name on there, it's going to take all of the same properties that we had on this one, which of course means it's going to put in that same background image. So we've got our summer image there, we've got our block of text that we just did, and then we've got our winter section that I just copied and pasted. So that's how easy it is to duplicate that class, because almost everything to do with that is based on the CSS except for this text here. It's really, really quick and simple to do that. But of course we have one big problem, that the image isn't the one that we want. And if we think back to what we did, we actually defined that image in the CSS. So we're going to have to make some changes to that CSS in order for this to work. But before we do that, I'm going to put in some IDs to these classes. Now IDs are very similar to classes in many ways. It's just a name that you can put in any of your HTML tags, and you can then reference that ID in your CSS. But the difference is that classes can be used multiple times on multiple tags, whereas IDs are only to be used once. So what I'm going to do is in this top one here, the section which we gave the season class to, which is for summer, I'm going to give that an ID, and I'm going to call it summer, which makes sense. And so the syntax is the same as for class, you just have ID equals and then the name of the ID that you want to use. And of course then I'm going to do the same thing down here for the winter section, except I'm going to give it the ID of winter. Right, so now back in our CSS, we have to think about what we want to change here. If we look at the rules that we put in for our season class, we set the image to the summer image, we set the height and positioning of that image and the margins, and we want to keep that the same for all of the different, or for both rather, the winter and the summer section. So the only thing that needs to change, depending on which ID we've used, is the background image. So I'm just going to take this part here, this line here, and I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to leave the rest as it is, because that's still going to apply to both of those sections, both of the sections which have the season class name. So now I need to find a way to specify the image for just the summer ID. So very similar to how we use these class names, except instead of using the full stop, we're going to use the hash symbol, because it's an ID rather than a class, and I'm going to put in the name summer, which is the first one that we used. Then if I paste back in that line of code that we had before that defines the summer season image, that now applies just to the ID summer. And all of these rules that we have here as part of our season class still apply as well. So I'll just make sure I save all of that, and let's go back to our live preview to see how it's looking. So we have our summer section that's back up and running, that's all fine, and of course down where our winter section is, we have no background image. So hopefully now you can think about what we need to do to make that section work. It's going to be almost exactly the same as what we had for summer. So again, I'm just going to copy and paste just to be efficient, speeds it up a little bit, paste that in. I'm going to change this ID to winter. Okay, so now this section of code here applies only to the HTML which has the ID of winter. Now, is that going to work? We've copied and pasted that, that's all looking good, but there's going to be an issue if we go back to our HTML, back to our live preview. You can see, of course, we still have that same image. And that's because we didn't change the image, we just copied it and pasted it. So if I go in here and I'll just change the image that we've got from summer image to the winter season image that we've got. Okay, now I'll save that, and now let's check our live preview and it should be looking a lot better. Okay, cool, so that's working. We've got summer section there and we've got the winter section down below. There's a little bit of an issue with reading that text over the top of that image, and we'll look at how to fix that with a gradient color overlay in just a second. But let's just recap what we've done with our IDs and with our classes. So let's have a look back in our HTML. Up the top, the first summer section, we have the opening section tag, which has a class of season and an ID of summer. So that means when we go to our CSS, it's going to take all of these rules for the season class and of course the rules for the summer ID. Then the only difference between that and this little section down the bottom here, this section has a class of season, same again, but now the ID is different. And of course the only thing that we changed in the ID was the background image. So hopefully you can see how that's all worked. It's reasonably complex, and the difference between classes and IDs is subtle but important. And once you get an understanding of how they work, it is easy to work with them, and you can create some efficient code because you can just put the important rules that you need in both of them in one place and then change what you need to in another. So I'm going to stop this video there, and in the next video we'll look at how we can put those color overlays on these images and perhaps look at putting in the footer, and that'll be just about us done for this website.